I welcome you to the Audit Committee, which again this month is being held under the Local Authorities Coronavirus Meetings Wales Regulations 2020. Once again, I'd like to manage expectations from the outset and highlight that there may be some glitches in this meeting, although we were lucky the last time, not too many. However, please be assured that we will learn from them and keep striving towards a seamless process. Also conscious that a number of the participants may have issues with bandwidth, and please can I suggest you turn off the video if that becomes an issue. This meeting is being broadcast live so that members of the public can I ask that you ensure you all mute your mics and remember to unmute them when you call to speak. And when you are called to speak, if you can put your hand up so I can identify. We now go through the process of calling out those councillor names that are present. So I'll start with myself. I'm Chair Paula O'Connor.
Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Peter Black.
Present.
Councillor David Hellywell.
Present.
Councillor Terry Hennigan. Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
John Moot.
Yeah, he is there. Councillor Oliver James. Councillor Peter Jones.
Present.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Present.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Sam Pritchard.
Present.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
Present.
Councillor Mike White.
Present.
And officers, Adam Hill.
Present.
Tracy Meredith.
Present.
Ben Smith.
Present.
Simon Cockings.
Present.
Adrian Charge.
Present.
Kath Swain.
Present.
Barry Gilbert.
Present.
And myself, I'm Jeremy, Parkhouse Democratic Services.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. If you can turn to the agenda, could I ask for any apologies for absence?
Apology from Councillor Erica Kirchner.
Thank you. Any disclosures of personal interest?
Yeah, Chair, Councillor Anderson. Item 8, agenda item 8, page 88. The Governor of Seaview School. I've sent my thing into the Democratic Services.
Thank you. Any other declarations?
Yes, Chairman, Paxton Hood Williams. I want to declare an interest in terms of item 8, the same as before, but this time is Christ School that I'm a governor of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you very much. If we can move on to agenda item 3, we have minutes from the previous 5 meetings to approve today. So if I start with the meeting of the 29th of January, are there any amendments or queries on these minutes that you wish to raise? If not, can I ask that we approve the minutes for the 29th of January?
Approved, Chair.
Okay, so we'll take those as approved for the 29th of January. If we can turn to the minutes for the 11th of February, if I can ask if there are any queries or amendments that wish to be made. If not, are we happy to approve those minutes for the 11th of February?
Move, Chairman.
Thank you. If we can turn to the minutes of the 10th of March, the same process. Are there any errors or accuracy issues that needs to be raised? If not, are we happy to approve those minutes for the 10th of March?
I'll move those again for you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The meeting of the 26th of May, again, are there any accuracy? Well, there's very few on that one actually, because that was an adjourned meeting. Are we happy to approve the minutes for the 26th of May, please?
Approve.
Yeah. The 1st of June, I think there are some issues of accuracy. So would you like to pick them up? I think Councillor Peter Jones, could I invite you in?
Yes, I want to confirm that I was in fact present at the meeting on the 1st of June. And I've got evidence to prove it if required.
Right, I remember you being there. And Councillor Jeff Jones?
Yes, likewise. I'm not listed as attending the meeting, but I was there.
Are there any other issues of accuracy within the minutes? Or are we happy now, subject to those 2 amendments, to accept them and approve them? Are we happy to approve them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we could move on to...
Apologies, Chair. Can I just come in? I had problems unmuting my mic. Item agenda 8, and then I think it's 3D. Can I declare an interest in that as a governor of Grosseid School?
Okay, thank you very much.
Apologies, Chair. I couldn't unmute.
No worry, we expect a glitch now and again, so thank you for coming in on that. Okay, if we can move on to the presentation, if I can invite Adam Hill to start the presentation, please. If you can keep it to between 10 and 15 minutes, that would be helpful.
I'll certainly do my best, Chair. Let me just share the screen. Is that okay for everyone to see?
That's fine. I can see it. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the purpose of the presentation really is to give an overview of the internal control environment, looking at both risk and assurance in terms of the governance that we undertake. So the presentation will review, first of all, an update on the internal control environment that we have, looking at governance framework, the internal governance that we have, and then the external governance again that will lead to the assurance, and how risk is then also woven into that to give that overview in terms of how we manage risk. So the overview is every member and every chief officer should understand the full scope of their responsibility. So the scheme of delegation, the council constitution, how they fit within the organisation, what their responsibilities for their service, where their actual agreements are, and what they can actually have delegated authority for. They must also have a strong grip of what's happening in the organisation and only stay within their realms of operation and not stray into other areas. And also be confident that the organisation's arrangements are fit for purpose and fit for the future. And that's an important one, and certainly what we've seen over the last few months is those changing circumstances. So we must be able to adapt as well. So the framework itself, in terms of giving an update over the framework, there are 2 core principles and 5 supporting principles. The 2 core principles: behaving with integrity, demonstrating strong commitment to ethical values and respecting the rule of the law, and ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. And that stakeholder engagement is very important so that we can monitor, involve, and ensure that we have a robust process in place. The 2 core principles then run through, so hold on to that in your mind in terms of the 2 core principles that run through the 5 supporting ones. So defining outcomes in terms of sustainable economic, social and environmental benefits. And we should look at all of those all time in depth, determining the interventions necessary to optimize the achievement of the intended outcomes. And we're moving more towards an outcome focused, and rather than perhaps it was input previously in years gone by, the need to be outcome focused, to know what it is we want to achieve, to be very clear in terms of performance management. Developing the entity's capacity, so Swansea's capacity, including the capacity of its leadership and individuals within it. And part of the governance framework is also that sort of Swansea manager and through to the directors, in terms of making sure that leadership is true leadership. So there's training and development opportunities in terms of leadership to understand and keep up to date with what's happening across local government, private sector and third sector, especially also within procurement, to make sure all managers, directors and key reportable staff are fit and able to have the capacity and knowledge to apply all these principles in day-to-day operation. We then need to manage risk and performance, and we have a lot of internal control, which I'll talk about shortly, and strong public financial management, which is key to the authority in making sure that we are both sustainable in the current climate and into the future. We also look at implementing good practice, being transparent, reporting and audit to deliver effective accountability. So we do need to ensure that everybody is held to account for the areas that they are responsible. And the council finally is committed to improving governance on a continuing basis through a process of evaluation, assessment and review. And we do that both through, which I'll talk about a golden thread shortly, but we do talk about that in terms of how we have various meetings. We have the senior management assurance statements, we have the annual governance plan, and we have lots of internal audits, external audits and third party audits, also to ensure that we are reviewing that governance and making sure that we are having best practice. And that also goes for sharing into other authorities. So let's just take a look at the two levels of internal governance. So these fit together as a full operational team, but they can be divided, although they cross, in terms of the political and the operational. So the council constitution is the main underpinning document that we are governed by, and we utilise that in both political and operational basis to see what we need to do to operate across the council. Talking of the council, the ultimate decision-making part of the organisation, in order to be able to get things through to council, we need to look at a corporate briefing and a cabinet structure. So a cabinet will either make a decision on that local level when it's there, and if necessary, it will report up to council, where it's a whole council decision that's required under the constitution. We then move into the scheme of delegation, looking across all the operational sites within the authority, making sure that everybody is clear on what is delegated to them to make decisions on an operational basis, and then reporting up via that council constitution document into whether it's cabinet or council where it needs to go. We have a corporate management team made up of the chief executive and directors, section 151 officer and monitoring officer, in order to make sure that corporate governance is picked up, that we monitor performance targets, that we look at issues, we horizon scan and use corporate management as the real operational direction, with cabinet council setting the strategic direction, and our job is to then deliver on that. We then have a leadership team where again the messages between council, cabinet and CMT come into leadership team to deliver, to make sure it's a joined up approach and to try and remove silos in terms of that governance and make a lean, flatter structure that will work across all tiers, coming together and pulling on the skills from across the leadership team. We then have the section 151 officer in charge of that financial governance, making sure that we are definitely staying within the financial remits that we've got, that we can't go bust, and that our spending is appropriate and justified in terms of what the powers are for a council to spend, either in partnership or within our own organisation. Then we have the monitoring officer, making sure that political governance, that we follow correct process in terms of whether that be recruitment, operation, the way the council and cabinet are structured, how scrutiny functions, and making sure that right the way across the board, we adhere to all the conditions that are required to be a fit and proper local authority. Then, in order to make sure there is the join up that I talked about earlier between political and operational, we have cabinet and CMT planning days to make sure that we understand the direction of travel, understand what's happening within the organisation, both politically and operationally, and also to be able to advise cabinet of where, from a an operational point of view, there may be the difficulties, new direction of travel, or new concept or schemes or laws coming in. This is then monitored through what we call PNFM, performance and financial monitoring meetings, and that looks at the basically the pulse of the organisation, making sure all our key performance indicators are looked at, making sure the risks are also considered, the financial, both looking forwards and in the current, to make sure that we're on target to hit everything that we need to hit, or take corrective action by forming it back into either leadership team, corporate management, or up to cabinet or council, depending on what areas we need to flex or move. We then have a departmental management team where we talk about that local information, how we're managing within the teams, how the teams are being deployed, and making sure that, again, we are meeting the needs of our customers, our residents, and making sure that our team is fit for purpose and adhering to any new codes of practice, good practice, or changes to legislation. All that we do so far then nicely fits into the committee structure, which is the Standards Committee, Audit Committee, PDC, Scrutiny, all fit within that umbrella, making sure that we're held to account all the way through everything that we do, any decision that's made or direction of travel, or through the PDCs, looking at policies that maybe we need to introduce to make us more fit either for the current operation or into the future. Scrutiny, again, is a part of that in terms of really holding us to account, identifying things that needs closer in-depth scrutiny, and to challenge and make sure that we are on the right path, or even potentially to suggest corrective action that we may need to take if not, or offer suggestions of different directions of travel. I'll take all these together. So performance management, risk management, corporate and service planning, budget monitoring, all happens through key points throughout the year, usually on a monthly basis. This is about making sure that governance internally is robust, followed, and we can pick things up very early to take corrective action rather than waiting till later in the year. And then finally, we have our colleagues in internal audit. Again, a robust challenge back to make sure that, again, we're following all those due processes. They're making sure that the evidence base is there, that actually assumptions aren't being made, and a critical friend to not only challenges in terms of decisions and how we've made things, and that there is that golden thread coming through, but also offering a challenge of, could we do something different? Is there a better way of doing something moving forward? And offering those recommendations in order for us to constantly improve. So then we move on to external governance. So again, these are sort of made up into 4 key areas. We start with the red boxes, which is Welsh Government, UK Government. So our 2 national bodies that set the direction for us, and also feed into where we come down to the commissioners, the darker blue boxes. Looking at the commissioners who challenges, we have to put submissions back in, making sure that we are adhering to the rules and regulations that they also set, or the guidance principles that they offer us, and put reports back in order to show and demonstrate that direction of travel. I'll go to the darker grey then on the right hand side of the screen. We then talk about our regulators, our inspectors, who make sure again that we are following. Estin, for anyone that doesn't know, is our regulator in and around schools, and making sure that we are meeting the curriculum, we are doing what we need to do. Planning inspectorate likewise, that we're not making rash or bold statements or decisions, that we're staying within the acts that we have to work in within planning. And then as we work through the other regulators, and WAO is the Wales Audit Office, and again they come in and will challenge us on the direction of travel, whether we're meeting our financial targets on a performance level and on a financial level. And then finally, regional partnerships, and there's a paper later on the agenda that will talk about regional partnerships, which has an array of different governance, but that also feeds into, we are a partner within a lot of those regional partnerships, and therefore have to follow other people's governance and make sure it also fits with our own governance in order to continue through. So we'll just talk quickly around managing risk. Inherent with it and all the things that I've said is that we need to manage risks as we go. And again, there's that risk, the management of risk, but also that assurance framework to ensure that we have assurance, not that we've just identified the risk, but we are putting mitigation in place to address those risks and minimize those risks. We'll never remove risk completely, but we should minimize it as much as we can. So we start with the strategic objectives for the council, the corporate plan, service plan, strategies, and so on, that underpin the direction of travel. From that, we then look at what the risk is. The risk mapping exercise is undertaken, which often you'll see the risk reported through to audit, and then the mitigation around that, and then understanding the risk appetite of the council, both in terms of appetite that we're willing to take in terms of perhaps financial commitment or whether the workforce, and then also what are the implications if something were to go wrong. What's the reputational risk around that? We often talk about money, we often talk about people, but as a leader for the community, we also have to think about that reputational risk that also comes with an authority like us. Then we have the controls, so we have to then map that against the scheme of delegation to make sure we are where we need to be, how much finance is going in, do we have cover, are there loans or repayment schemes that are needed around how we're going to move forward on that? Are we taking too much of a risk? Are we hitting and maintaining our reserves? And then legal, in terms of are we following due process? It could be in procurement, it could be in terms of deployment of staff, or just in terms of the action. Do we have a legal right as an authority to be able to undertake that before we progress? And then information and data in terms of recording within that, how we're doing in that risk, whether it's going up or down, how that changes, within monitoring the risk. And then we get the assurance through the audit scrutiny, KPIs and evidence. And the evidence you'll have seen in a previous committee through the senior management assurance documents and also the annual government statement, whereby that gives us more of an assurance over the year to see the direction of travel. So I won't go through this in too much detail because I'm conscious of time, but there's the three main areas. Really, there's the risk identification and response, and that flows through team risk, service risk, directorate risk, and corporate risk. So they're the four main risk areas that we have. Team risk is that local risk, which we have in terms of how a team operates, what they do on a day-to-day basis. Then we go up to sort of service area, which could be, say, recruitment of making sure we've got recruitment of qualified staff. We then move on to directorate risks. So what would impact on a whole directorate area? So for my own directorate, it could be a snap election, for example, and what would the impact be on the team and the commitment that we've got to projects or ongoing service provision. And then we get on to corporate risks, and I guess Brexit is back in our sights again, the EU exit. So again, it's what's the consequences of that, and that would be a corporate risk for us. We then manage it through the next tier: manager, head of service, director, and CMT. Each one of those blocks is managed by that individual group, and then, as you can see, it feeds through within those. So depending on where the risk is and how it would feed, it would go back to the director or head of service or manager, or up the chain up to CMT, depending on where that falls, because it's not as easy as just drawing a line and saying that's just a service risk. Some of them are a service but could be then elevated to a directorate risk, and vice versa. A directorate risk could move down to a service as we mitigate it. And that's the escalation channel along the bottom. Service plans, corporate plans from the service risks onwards, and then across the bottom we have the assurance bit, and that ultimately gets picked up directly on managing risk through audit. Again, this is sort of, I won't do this. The same sort of principle that you've just been through, but just to show how the service planning and how it all fits together in terms of timescale. So corporate planning, service planning, annual planning cycle. Every year we would go through that process. The service obviously picks up directorate and service risk. Corporate planning would pick up those corporate risks. CMT will then also do an annual risk ID evaluation and response, as will directors and heads of service for Directorate and Social. But then every month, monitoring and control would happen at CMT and will also happen at PNFM, as mentioned earlier, with Audit Committee again having that oversight. Again, just on the assurance, it was just trying to show you that the internal and external audit work together. So internal will pick up more of that day-to-day, external will pick up more of the independent assurance, and the corporate oversight sort of sits across all of that. And then you can see at the bottom sort of the key areas moving from internal to external as it moves along, and where that sort of sits within the corporate or independent. And that, Chair, is in a nutshell the presentation.
Thank you very much. That's very comprehensive. And I ask if we get that presentation circulated to all committee members.
Yes, Chair.
I'm looking at that, so it's a perfect picture of what happens when you've got full staff, you've got no additional pressures. And that the Audit Committee have seen significant issues around staff resource pressures, performance against CPRs falling short, a number of areas which I'm sure a lot of members will want to pick up. So although you've got a perfect picture there, there are some shortcomings in what the Audit Committee have received, which is why we've asked for you to present to us today. Just for you to be aware, I've asked to meet with the Chief Executive next week to go through the concerns the Audit Committee's had historically around risk management, the pressures on workforce resource, the control over agency staff usage, the growing numbers of the moderate internal audit reports coming out, as well as some other minor issues. But first, can I open up for questions, please, with members that are in the meeting? I can see Councillor Mike White, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Adam in relation to our role in education. Adam, back in 2012, a board called SWAMAC was introduced. I gather from September 2012. Clearly, it doesn't look that obviously that SWAMAC worked out. Now, obviously, ERU come in 2014. Was this a rebrand? And because it seems the same authorities were involved in the partnership work again. And also, have there been any lessons learned by now by going through it with educational regional work in ERU? Thank you, Adam.
Okay, I'll try and answer that. I don't think I caught all of it, Mike. I'm afraid you sort of broke up a little bit, but I'll give it a go. And if you need to come back with other things, then please do. I don't know about SWAMAC. That's before my time, I'm afraid. So I don't know about that. I can talk to you a little bit about ERU, and certainly about how that has changed. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future paper as well, in terms of ERU and the governance. I can tell you that, yeah, are there lessons learned? Part of any partnership that we're in, including education and including ERU, it is about a review of how we are delivering. What are the standards? What are the performance targets? Are we meeting those, or are we falling short? And I think what we've seen in ERU is the changes, certainly over the last few years, in terms of how that has evolved into a different, had challenges along the way, and is currently going through another iteration, really, on the back of the learning to make it more fit for purpose. And I think that's certainly a sum that you can see within education, in terms of it, that's evolving in its own way, and keeping up to date means that we must evolve. In terms of, was it a rebrand? I don't believe it was a rebrand. I think it is about evolving into what is fit for purpose. And I certainly think where ERU is at the moment is evolving again to take account of where education is today, with curriculum and changing emphasis. And so, what will come out of this current review is hopefully a stronger, better joint partnership than it was previously. I think you did ask about membership. Yeah, membership have changed over the years as they do. It's always been a slightly different footprint with people joining from different authorities. And again, I think that shows and demonstrates the willingness to change, is that we're not willing to just stand still and go with the same footprint or the same people as the partners, that we are open to that challenge and that willingness to move and either opt in or opt out as necessary. Did that answer all the points?
Yeah, I believe you've covered the areas I wanted to have information on, Andrew. Yes, I'm more than satisfied with the potential response. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Councillor White. Are there any other questions for Adam, please? I can't see any hands up.
You've got Jeff Jones and Peter Black.
Peter Black. Councillor Peter Black?
You're on mute, Peter.
Councillor Peter Black, can I invite you to comment? Microphone.
Yeah, right. Sorry. I want to raise an issue around risk management. As you know, I've just taken over as chair of scrutiny, and I'm concerned at the lack of resource available to the scrutiny support teams. Currently, I've been informed we've got one inquiry on hold and at least 3 or 4 working groups on hold, not just because we've got a vacancy and because one member of staff is on maternity, but essentially because we just don't have enough staff in the scrutiny division to cope with all the work that needs to be done. If we're not going to have adequate scrutiny, then we're going to have a situation where the council is not being run effectively and things are going to slip through. So I would ask, therefore, that we do have a look at the resource available to the scrutiny teams to ensure that that particular function is properly resourced, and so that we can move forward in a collaborative way to achieve the best possible outcome for the council and manage the risk which we all face on a day-by-day basis.
Adam, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, happy to. As Councillor Black will know, he has been in touch with both the Chief Executive and myself to flag this as a risk. We've agreed that we will have a meeting with him to explore these. We haven't set that up as yet, but I have responded back to Peter on this matter, and we'll set a meeting up to discuss it. It's been raised. We now need to go through and understand what those challenges are. We need to understand in more detail. We are coming out of unprecedented times, which has meant that we have had to pick up other duties. So to be able to respond in the speed of almost a few days when this was raised is more difficult. And will we always have that number of people that we'd always like? It'd be great if I could have all the team members that I'd like across all my services. What we've got to balance and work together on is how do we deploy a workforce to make sure it's fit for purpose, but also safeguard the authority in terms of how we can deploy those staff and stay within the financial realms that we've got. And what we need to do is take it outside of this forum and just understand where the real pressures are, how much work do we need to be able to do, and where's the priority of that piece of work, and then how do we then resource that working together in order to make that happen. So the commitment's there from the Chief Executive and myself in order to meet with Peter, and actually hopefully we can address this in the very near future.
Can I just say, Chair, I actually haven't had a response agreeing to the meeting, but I'm very pleased that Adam has now agreed to that meeting. And this is not the first time this has been raised. This is not just a few days ago. I know the previous Chair of Scrutiny raised this, and I know the Leader of the Opposition has raised this. It is a very important issue which does need to be addressed, and it should be up to the Scrutiny Committee to set the priorities, not the officers and not the Cabinet. But I'm very grateful for that meeting. I look forward to it. Thank you, Chair.
Peter, you did respond back to my my response, if you recall. So you have had a response, and
yeah, I've had a response, but not an agreement to the meeting. But you've now agreed to the meeting, so I'm very pleased with that. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you both. I've got another hand up. I think Councillor Peter Jones.
No, Jeff Jones it was.
Oh, I got Peter showing on.
Well, I
Jeff?
was first, I'm sure. Yeah.
Jeff, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, it was on a similar vein to Mike White, really. Adam, you actually mentioned the council constitution, which is an extremely important document, and also about partnerships. what if we're in a situation where there are two partners where shall we say, the council constitution conflicts? How is that actually resolved, and what if it's not resolved?
Okay, well, we would need to resolve it because we can't really work outside of the council's constitution. It depends on the partnership that's being set up, but what we would need to do in order for us to work within it, we'd have to work within the constitution. If not, we would have to go through to council, and council would have to make a decision over and above the constitution, either changing the constitution, which we've done on times before, or look for an alternative on a temporary measure or something in that way in order to do it. But on as much as possible, we would try and work within our constitution as our rule, because we'd want to make sure that it is fit for purpose and doesn't breach anything that we've got.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Peter Jones, is your hand still up? The mic is moved to Councillor Peter Jones.
Sorry, I'll start again. I just wanted to endorse Councillor Black's comments in relation to scrutiny. This is a serious issue. I know that they are understaffed. The previous member of staff left scrutiny for another post back, I think, in August of last year, nearly a year ago now. And from time to time, I've queried what is happening about filling that vacant post. I'm still unclear as to quite what the position is, but clearly that team is seriously understaffed in relation to their responsibilities, including, I might say, in relation to my own natural environment performance panel. I do know that at least one other full-time member of the team has been seconded into COVID support work, and I believe she will continue in that role until September or thereabouts. So clearly there's always going to be a problem, and I'm sure this is a problem right across the council, not just in scrutiny. But nevertheless, I would endorse Peter's concerns. Scrutiny is an important function. There is a growing backlog of work, and I hope that when the meeting takes place with the Chief Executive, that these matters can be resolved, that the vacant post, if it is still vacant, can be filled, so that scrutiny can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. If I can sort of perhaps summarise some, are there any other councillors wishing to comment before I try to summarise? No? I totally agree with all concerns raised around the risk management arrangements, and particularly the workforce resource. I totally understand you have to prioritise where that resource is most needed with the current climate and the pressures financially, as well as the COVID pressures. But I think from an audit committee point of view, risk and risk management is a key component of the committee's function. I also agree that it is a key component of scrutiny function, and I will endeavour to raise the concerns of the audit committee when I meet with the Chief Exec and Adam, which is I'm waiting for confirmation of next week. But it's not just risk management, it's the resource, and the impact of that is the growth in the moderate internal audit reports that we're seeing coming through. I think there's a real concern that the Chief Internal Auditor has around the potential weaknesses in control, which underpins the whole of the internal audit and the governance framework that Adam, you've just described in the perfect world. I know every officer and every member of staff are endeavouring to sustain the governance and the tightness of the controls, but I do feel, as the chair of audit, I'm beginning to see some cracks emerging through the internal audit work and also the external audit work. And I know members of this audit committee have expressed that concern as well, including members who have commented today. So if I can thank you, Adam, for the presentation, and I know I will be picking this up further on behalf of the audit committee, and I know Councillor Black and other councillors will also have some concerns to express to officers as time progresses. Having said that, if we can move on to Adam, it's your stage again, I think, and that's the review of partnership. Can I just, in case you're not aware, Adam, because you made reference to the Welsh Government review in your report, I asked that that Welsh Government final report be circulated to members of the Audit Committee so they've got the total context so that they can contribute as appropriate to the discussions today.
Great, and again, happy to take questions as best I can on that also, and if you want me to do an overview of that, happy to either today or at some point in the future.
Okay, so we've got the report, and obviously if you could pick up the salient points in the report, and then we can take questions from the committee.
Will do, Chair. So in terms of the report that you've got in front of you, I won't read directly from it. I will take out some key points. So it's not providing a comprehensive overview of every partnership that we've got and in depth with everything. What it's trying to give you is the description of some of the key partnerships, which are significant in terms of scale, cost and outcomes. And then a number of those principles can then be followed through into all the partnerships. So it provides a description of the different forms, structures, partnership working and processes, and how they manage those risks and assess those outcomes. It also tries to give you a sense of where the statutory requirements are placed on councils and where there is a mandate to work collaboratively. So that also needs to be borne in mind in terms of what we're going through. The partnerships landscape locally, regionally and nationally is very crowded and complex, and there is, and you'll have seen from now the report that you've had distributed to you, that that review itself talks about how complex, but also about whether or not there is a rationalisation process. And although it doesn't come out to recommend that, there is still a need, as we talked about sort of within the governance framework previously, we must constantly review and reshape and look at how our partnerships are going forward and are they still fit for purpose. So in 2017, September 2017, there were around 100 partnerships. That's obviously growing by 2020. We have far more than that in terms of partnership, and they could be low-level partnership working on the ground right up to really key strategic partnerships like ERU, West Glamorgan Regional Partnership, and so on. So we'll cover a bit more of that shortly. And again, there is a mixture of both formally constituted partnerships, and then there are formally constituted subgroups, then round to informally constituted groups and other forms of collaboration that we do across all our organisations. So again, all that myriad of differences is tried to be kept at relatively high level, but still encapsulated within the report. So there's a couple of key ones really to show, and ERU, which Mike talked about in the previous presentation, is that school improvement, and although it started 2014, it's a statutory responsibility. Still, remember, remains with the education authority itself. So the local authority, Swansea, in its entirety, is still our responsibility. But it's good that we can work cross-boundary with others, with Newport Talbot, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire, to look at a consortium about how do we improve together, learn good practice across boundaries, understand the challenges and where each school is coming from, whether that be building, education, curriculum, or whichever, and how they're doing that good practice and share that. Again, as Mike alluded to, again, it's going through a new iteration, and that is that the new Swansea-based City Deal footprint will be based, the new ERU will be based on, and that arrangement will come in by the 1st of April 2021. So I can't really talk any more of that because that's being shaped. But again, it shows that we are willing to review and look at how partnerships move forward and how that risk is managed and how we can learn from good practice. Another big one is the West Glamorgan Regional Partnership, statutory duty again on local authorities and health boards. So this is a dual responsibility that we have working together. We need to produce that regional plan to meet the health and social care. So this is around Dave Howe's area predominantly in terms of adult social care. And how do we focus and meet the needs of the population for prevention and early intervention to stop things escalating and stop the needs of the community becoming more difficult and actually hitting early, because prevention is better than cure. Any decisions that arise out of the West Glamorgan Regional Partnership, the board that governs it currently still has to report back to both Cabinet and Health Board for endorsement and approval. So there is still that, again, as Jeff talked about earlier, you know, how do we make sure it fits our constitution? Well, this is how we fit it. We make sure that those decisions still have to come back through our decision-making bodies in order to be able to confirm that governance. So the board would recommend it through as it comes. Within this is a good example of where there would then be subgroups which divide up and become a more focal point across what we'd work on. So there are three boards: Adult Transformation Board, Integrated Transformation Board, and Children and Young People Transformation Board, so that these can be bitten off into bite-sized chunks and dealt with within the merit within the area. But still there is a cross-cutting agenda here. So again, it will feed back to that board so we can learn good practice from across those areas, not just having it as one authority that's trying to do everything. We can learn from our partners also. So the boards are made up from the local authority, health board, third sector, and also citizens. So again, this is a great demonstration of how we pull the residents in to help us shape the services, help us understand what's really happening on the ground, and so we don't lose touch and stay just so strategic we miss the needs of where residents are. This is one of those that during coronavirus, new governance, temporary governance arrangements were put in place. These will revert back shortly, but they stepped up into a silver community command because of the increasing risk and issues around the more vulnerable or older generation. So again, we had to look at that in a different way and respond accordingly. But I'm pleased to say that that will revert back to the previous once we're just out of this initial part of the crisis. The final one I'm going to talk about today is the Swansea Bay City deal, which is quite a big, I suppose, partnership for us. No statutory requirement on this one. So again, shows a different focal point here in terms of how we operate for the council. So Swansea Bay City deal, both UK and Welsh government policy frameworks encourage local council participation in the development of a regional economic development partnership. And that's what Swansea Bay City deal is. You'll know there are other city deals in and around Wales also. And again, there is learning from each of those. The projects themselves are slightly different. And again, this would also feed into the Great Western Gateway, which goes from Swindon through to Swansea. So all feeds into a rich tapestry of working together. So the Swansea Bay City deal, again, Swansea, Carmarthenshire, Neathport, Talbot and Pembrokeshire councils all working together on that, again, sharing learning, experience, knowledge and skill sets in order to move that forward. So the role of this is to have a joint committee, and that joint committee develops and implements appropriate governance structures. So looking at the projects, the planning and agreeing the city deal strategy and delivery, and also managing that performance. It says within the report, so I won't reiterate what the membership is, but as you can see, it is a variety of different agencies coming around the table for that one, from health boards through to the local authorities themselves. There is then an economic strategy board which feeds into this. So if you like another board but a subgroup of that main body, and again similar to what we heard previously, this is about making sure that we can focus on areas and add real value to a process rather than trying to do everything and be everything to everyone. We break it down to bite-sized chunks. So the Economic Strategy Board is made up from representatives of private sector, perhaps experts in energy, life sciences, skills manufacturing, and so on. And they are specialists in their sector that can give real advice in real language today that will influence decisions that we make and how that moves forward. Finally, there's a programme board then attached to that, which is a final role subgroup within it. And this makes the overall recommendations for the overall City Deal programme, oversees the performance and project delivery, and advises on that strategic direction to the Economic Strategy Board and also to the Joint Committee. This is all about improving public services in areas really of economic development, housing, regen, transport, planning, and also strategic land use. So again, preparing us and making us sustainable as the whole city of Swansea, both for now and the future. I suppose then just to conclude, many partnerships, as I say, that's not a in-depth, I'm going to explore every partnership, and it may be that the committee in full time might want to look at other partnerships and maybe drill down in a little more detail, something like the PSB again, or one of the others that we've already mentioned, or others in the report. The introduction of the Local Government Elections Bill Wales in 2019 does provide us an opportunity to rethink that collaborative working. You know, there is an ethos there, and the report obviously that you've seen does say challenge. Don't just assume what we've always had is what we're always going to have. Have a look at, is there something that's a better fit? Is there something on the horizon when we're scanning the horizon that actually we need to adjust? And are there ways of merging, joining, or co-producing future partnerships in order to get a better fit and a better delivery to our residents? And I think that's all I need to say, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I've got quite a few hands up, so I'll take them in the order that they're appearing on the screen, if members will allow. The first one I've got is Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just two quick questions. Paragraph 4.6, there's reference there to the effectively the disbanding of ERO, and we're going to be setting up a new partnership consortium from April 2021. I'm just wondering what scrutiny arrangements are being built into that partnership. I think one of the big failings of ERO is it's been very difficult to actually get a handle on what they've been doing and to hold them to account for it. And then the second question on paragraph 11.2, the local transport plan, which currently is for the period 2015 to 2020. So as that is due to expire this year, are we in the process of drawing up a new local transport plan, and what arrangements will be made to bring that before council and or scrutiny in due course? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Adam, are you able to respond to those questions?
I'll have to do a written response. I'm not close enough to ERU to know the detail of what that plan is. I can certainly ask the Director of Education to come back and actually furnish you with that detail. And the same with the local transport plan. I'll get Martin Nichols, the Director, to do you a response.
Can I ask then that they be put down as an action for the Audit Committee tracker so that Councillor Peter Black gets that response, please? Thank you. The next councillor is Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thank you, Chair. A comment and a question. My comment is, I notice on I think it's on the second page of the report, that back in 2017, the council was involved in about 100 different partnerships. And on the face of it, that sounds almost ridiculous. But I'd like to actually look at that more conversely and say that in many ways it shows that the right approach of the council, that no longer can any local authority across Wales still do everything in isolation and just stick to themselves. So I think in some ways we can almost take heart in the fact that there are so many partnerships, because it shows to me that it's the right way forward, that we're working with different authorities depending on what the issue is and on what the actual subject matter is. So in some ways, I don't think that's as bad as it sounds. But my sub question to that then is, has that been looked at again more recently? Because that's 3 years ago. And have we got a more up-to-date figure on the number of partnerships that the council is currently involved in? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so in answer to that, I totally agree with your first statement. Actually, you know, Swansea is in a very good place in terms of partnerships, and we've seen that through the response to COVID and how that partnerships have come together to do a very comprehensive response to it in order to safeguard our residents. So I think you should take some comfort that the number of partnerships is very much a positive. In terms of the number, yeah, it's a moving sands partnerships because they only last as long as the partnership is needed. So there is probably 50 to 70 substantial, and all the others will ebb and flow. They start and finish in task groups. So it's always very difficult. So the reason I've just talked in, there are more in my presentation than the 100 is that, you know, if whatever number I tell you today, if you ask me again in a month, it'd probably be a different number. But every partnership is reviewed by each of the officers that sit on it about, is it still right for us to be part of it? Is it still got the outcomes that we're looking for? And do we still need to be in that partnership? And that's seen through ERU and so on that we're renewing.
Thanks, Adam.
Okay, thank you. The next councillor I have the hand up is Councillor Peter Jones. Councillor Peter Jones.
Unmute.
Okay, Councillor Jones. Your mic is on mute, Councillor Peter Jones. Can you hear me, Councillor Peter Jones?
Yes, I'm trying to unmute.
That's it, you're on mute. No, you're muted again. Just press once.
We can hear you, Peter.
That's it, you're unmuted now.
I'll try. Thank you. I'll never get the hang of this technology. I give up. First of all, I just wanted to comment that we can see from this report that there is a maze of different partnership bodies. And my first reaction was, my God, do we really need all these bodies? But I can understand that in a democracy, and I hope we are a democracy, this is how democracy works. It works at committee level in all sorts of partnership ways. And although it may be overwhelming at times and maybe bewildering, that's the price we pay, I suspect, for having proper consultation and proper democracy. Having said that, my comments are with reference to the Public Services Board, and not for the first time, perhaps, in making these comments. I mean, I sit on the Working with Nature task group, which is looking at, of course, the Working with Nature theme within the Wellbeing Plan under the PSB. And we work, of course, with representatives from NRW, the Swansea Environmental Forum, and other similar environmentally interested organisations, including the Environment Centre here in Swansea. And that's great. And we do some good work, I believe. But what has struck me about it, and I've been doing this for nearly 3 years now, it's a lot of repetition, a lot of duplication. When I look at the corporate well-being objective for natural resources and biodiversity, much of what our Working with Nature group has been asking itself about is already there in our corporate plan. And I wonder to what extent, therefore, we are adding to, providing value added, if you like, to policy that the council already has put in place. Yes, we are consulting outside, but I hope we would do that anyway, whether in the form of a formal partnership or not. So I just wonder not just perhaps in relation to working with nature, but more generally, particularly with reference to the Public Services Board, whether we are in fact getting added value across the way for it. I'm sure we get some to some extent, but whether it justifies the extent of the structure that we've put in place, and this may be true of course in other partnership activities, are we really getting value for money in terms of staff time, activity, and so forth? I don't know whether Adam feels able to answer that, but it's just a general observation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Adam, are you able to respond?
Yeah, happy to come back on that. I think you're absolutely on the money, Peter, on that one. I think the Public Service Board, has been established now for a few years. It is maturing into what it needs to be. I think the issue has been that it was so ambitious in its original setup in terms of what it wanted to achieve, it almost buried itself in trying to be all things to all people. So last year we went through a governance review in order to streamline that and make sure that we have an accountability structure, making each of the 4 partners directly responsible for one of the work streams, and then working through onto a wider program group, so we can actually start to identify what it is that we need to deliver on that will add value, not just do the same we've always done and then badge it as PSB, but actually come up with what they are. So we had a workshop towards mid last year where we started to scope and understand. The problem was we were already in train in order to deliver the wellbeing plan for that year, and we will be assessed against it. So we had to get to the end of that year in order to be able to make a big change and actually look at really focusing on what will add value. Since then, of course, we went into COVID, which affected us being able to complete the wellbeing plan and move on to a new structure, which we are looking to do now in terms of restarting the PSB with a much slimmer, tighter, firmer grasp on what it is that we want to achieve. And each of those 4 work streams will look at only some key result areas, a limited number that we have the resource for. Part of the issue we do have, though, is during COVID, because funding has needed to be reallocated, the government have withdrawn all their funding from the PSB, the Welsh Government, and therefore we don't have any of the funding that we had previously to do the little bits of work that we were able to do. So we really do now need to think of slimming down what it is that we're doing and looking where we add the most value for the money that each of the organisations are investing.
Thank you, Adam. I can see Councillor Jeff Jones trying to get my attention. Jeff, can I call on you next?
Yeah, my apologies. I can't seem to find the icon with the hand, so that's why I'm putting my hand up all the time. Yeah, it's on that theme, actually. I can see in 3, and I know Councillor Leslie Walton actually mentioned about 100 partnerships, but it's got a figure there of £496,110 that these partnerships are costing us. And we're actually on about adding value. Have we got any idea with regards to what value we get from the investment we actually make at the present time?
We've certainly not done that as an exercise, because some of the value isn't cash related. I mean, if we use COVID as a prime example, we have a really good, strong working relationship now with the police, and in terms of what they deliver, when there have been hotspots, difficulties, we have that open relationship. Now that's come on the back of Building Safer Swansea partnership. It's come on the back of the PSB and the relationships that we build. You can't easily put a value on that. And I think what we need to be careful of is we don't look at only a financial return, but a partnership return. So again, whether you look at the PSB or you look at what we've done in education and ERU in terms of returning the schools back after COVID, or you look at the social services partnership in terms of what methods we've deployed in order to keep our care homes safe, all those are on the back of the partnerships and the working relationship. The way we've delivered the TTP test, track and protect, and how we've put that together, which is a health board initiative supported by the local authorities, again, it's very difficult to put a financial sum on that, but the way we've worked together in order to deliver that scheme has been recognised across Wales as the model of good practice in order to deliver. So again, what I don't want to get hung up on is what do we get in cash contribution. What we can show is that there is a lot of great work, a lot of doors that are opened, and that true partnership, that sharing of resource in order to respond to either a crisis or business as usual, and actually ways in which we can share resource, co-produce things that actually brings savings to the authority by able to work together, whether that's through procurement or service delivery or responding to a critical need.
Sorry, Chair, can I just expand? So are we also looking at areas where no value is added? We don't get anything out of it. So would we actually, shall we say, get rid of that partnership or not follow things, the partnership has actually come up with?
Yeah, so each of the partnerships, as mentioned earlier, we'd review what is it, what's our outcome. The first thing we'd look to do is, if we're in a partnership, is why was it set up? What is the aim of it to deliver? If it's no longer, because there does come a natural life in a partnership as well, when actually it gets to the end of what it is. So if we take, again, for example, the High Street in Swansea, we've got a task and finish group set up through the PSB Safer Swansea. That's a finite. So at the end of the year, we're going to review that and say, well, okay, is that partnership still there? Is it still adding the value? Or actually, should it now cease to exist and it'll just go back to Safer Swansea, and we'll just pick that up under the normal board? Or do we need to refocus that to deliver a new priority that's there? Or does it have to be something else? So every partnership should go through that process of what value we're adding, and if we're not adding any value, absolutely it's time to bring it to an end.
Okay, thanks, good.
I've got two councillor hands up, Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams and then Councillor Mike White, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to really pick up, I suspect, to a certain degree on what Councillor Jones was saying earlier. We obviously have a proliferation of bodies at regional level and in Swansea with the PSB, etc. I'm just wondering how much overlap you see in terms of what's going on across these boards, Adam, and how much duplication of effort that we're getting with officers in terms of time wasted and that sort of thing. And is there any way that you think you can streamline this and get us to a situation where you certainly have people working, let's say 5% effectively at the time rather than have 5% on wasted bureaucracy? But that's another story, I guess.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely duplication. I think any partnership that you're working in, that there will always be, and we've already started to look at, certainly with the regional planning boards and looking at the PSB, how can they work more closely together. So we set up a group whereby the leads of the RPB and the leads of the PSB have got together to clarify. So it's not necessarily that we wouldn't merge the two or separate the two. What we would look for are where are the key result areas for each of those groups to make sure we put in the resources and getting the outcomes from each of those groups directly and maximizing the outputs that we can get. So that is happening on each of them. Is it happening 100%? What I'm not going to do is sit here and paint this perfect picture as I did. The model of governance is the model of governance. That's what we aim to. It's the same with boards. It is also about the makeup and the relationships. If you've got a good group of officers, members that are willing to work together, you only need one change and that can change the whole ethos of that board. So it is important that we keep revisiting it, and it should be something we never get to the end of. We should always revisit, certainly annually, on are we still achieving? What was the outcome for that year? Do we need to move again forwards? Do we need to stop or cease? And where is that overlap? And again, our partners, especially with police, fire, health boards, they're of the same. We have a smaller resource than we used to have. So we need to maximise their deployment to get the most effective return on our investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we can go across finally now to, where's he gone?
I am here, Chair.
Can't see a picture, Mike. Okay.
Sure, I am looking at the camera in front of me. Right. Right. Mike, what I'd like to ask Adam, Chair, if possible. Obviously, with the boards, when I've obviously gone to meetings, and with different sort of agencies, authorities involved, the sort of smaller minor authorities always feel that they're a bit sort of swamped of bureaucracy. And they feel that it's all about us keeping ownership, rather than obviously pool our ideas, put our good resources together, and obviously show that if there's good practice, that we utilise the good practice. But I think, as I say, the main thing here is obviously to have the balance right, and also the qualities and the expertise. And I do welcome, the involvement as well of citizenship involvement on these boards. They obviously are a fresh pair of eyes. They see what things that we might not pick up as an authority. So I just like to have your views on that, Adam.
Okay, I think there will always be a challenge for someone like Swansea being sat round the table, because we are, a big organisation that carries some clout, and our needs and I suppose demands are usually quite different from some of the smaller organisations, and so there is always going to be a tension with smaller organisations coming to the table and not feeling they've got the voice that perhaps they wish they'd got. Our job is to make sure that whatever voice is out there, we hear, and we involve them and encourage them to have that window and have that opportunity to make sure that we do hear that voice, because it's not that it's any less important. It's just that we are a big sector, and as such, there's always this hierarchy, isn't there, between strategic coming down to operational. A number of the smaller organisations tend to be more operational than strategic, and it has to be fit for the purpose of the body. And part of that was, if you look at the PSB, in changing that governance structure, was the joint committee needed to look at the strategic direction, and what we then needed is that wider board and body that actually can get into that detail and make it happen through the work streams. So it's about giving them the voice in the right place to be heard and influence. And I think we're getting better than that, better with each time we review and each time we have an organisation. And every time we review a board, I mean, certainly in terms of other authorities, again, I use the COVID scenario, Neath is a much smaller organisation than we are, but we sat around the table as equal partners with the health board. And you could almost say that Swansea and the health board are the real big players, but Neath throughout the whole of that process were brought in to be an equal partner in a sub-region basis. So in the Swansea Bay region. So I think we are getting better, and it's sometimes the structures that we've got previously haven't lent themselves to the smaller voice being heard, and I think we are addressing that as quickly as we can.
Okay, I need to bring this agenda item to a close. I've got a couple of comments to make, but I didn't want to rush this agenda item because I think it's a really important paper that this committee received. One simple question I've got, I'm assuming you have an answer for, Adam, is when the review was undertaken by the Welsh Government, there was a call for evidence, and I've not seen Swansea City Council providing any evidence. Was there any reason for that?
Yeah, and from what I remember, I needed to just double check this, because when I remember reading it previously and in the list at the front, but I think we provided it in a different way, not just under Swansea. I think we also provided it under the PSB, and we were featured under the PSB return rather than under Swansea Council. So okay. I know we fed into it, and I know I attended a number of meetings on it. But again, it's that wearing a number of hats, and it's whichever one they've captured, and for the purpose of that, because it was partnerships, I know definitely responded under the PSB banner, and I'm not sure why we're not featured further in that list in terms of where it talks about local authorities, because we definitely responded.
Okay, thank you for that. Obviously, this is highly complex area, but from the Audit Committee's perspective, we need to be assured that the partnerships are effective and achieving the outcomes that they were set up to achieve. And also a point that's been made by council members is that they are achieving value for money as well. I noted in the final report that was circulated, there are 11 recommendations. Some of those will go some way to assuring the Audit Committee that they are working effectively and they are delivering value for money. So my question is, how are those recommendations being addressed and reported and monitored within the Council of Swansea?
Thank you, Chair. From what I remember at the time, the PSB took the initial push of that. I'm not sure that they've been reported anywhere else going forward in the council, other than being picked up by each director where there is a relationship to pick up. A number of them were to be from Welsh Government, also to pick up. So obviously we need to wait for Welsh Government to respond in those, and ours we will pick up through CMT, which obviously CMT had sight of the report, and we'll pick them up through each of the directorates where it sits.
There are a number of recommendations that I would deem as localised. So if I could ask that perhaps towards the end of the calendar year, if we can have an update report on how this council is progressing against those recommendations, because a number of the queries that have been raised by members today would be answered if we could have that report.
Yes, Chair, I see no problem with that.
Great, that's lovely. Thank you very much for that. And perhaps we can move on. As I said, I apologise for taking such time on that particular agenda item, but I do think it's important that that was sufficiently aired, and thank you all for your contributions. The next agenda item is yours, Adam, again, and then I think we can have a rest then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So you may recall that you'll have seen this paper previously. It did come to the committee. At the time, there was a view, I believe. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that committee, but there was a view that it perhaps wasn't the right time, if I understand the reporting back then. So again, it's coming forward. I won't go back through the report because I know you'll have all read it. I think it's something we seriously need to consider. You know, a lay member does bring tremendous skill and value to boards. Quite often an impartial voice to the discussions can also help bring a specialist skill perhaps that we don't have necessarily, and you know, we don't always know what everyone's skill set is around the table, but there may be something that we do want to bring somebody in order to be able to add a bit of something different that we don't normally have, and a lay member is a great way of doing that isn't connected to either the organisation or a political party, or you know, just may have a specialist skill that can bring in. So it's when we look to our colleagues in other authorities, again, they have a similar position where they're increasing their number of lay members. And I know there's a balance to be had in terms of voting or where the power base lies, but in something like audit, it should be all around actually challenging, scrutinising, getting under the skin of, making us having that assurance. So perhaps, you know, this is a way of bolstering that assurance and giving that little bit extra in order to make this work. So so I think it was December 2019 this paper came up. So I would ask that you know, consideration be given to this as a way of adding strength, not weakening what you've got, but maybe identifying what there is that the audit committee could benefit from to add either more depth or breadth to the committee. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Are there any questions for Adam on that paper? No views? Paxton.
Can I just,
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry, Madam Chairman.
Who's speaking? Go on, Paxton.
Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams. I'll come back to you then, Jack.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to say, I think obviously what Adam is saying is right. I think there is that benefit that we get from lay members coming in. I have to say, and I hope I don't embarrass you in saying it, that certainly with Alan before you and yourself, it's brought a whole different perspective to audit, and I think has improved it significantly. And that's the advantage I think that lay members can have, and I think you've shown that very demonstrated very specifically. So in that case, I would certainly support what Adam was saying in that respect.
Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, I think I mirror what Paxton has actually said there. It was only just a little query really with one of the stipulations. Are you able to commit to attending a minimum of 5 meetings a year? Why the 5 limit? Is that a minimum amount? I can't remember how many audit meetings we actually have a year. There seems to be a lot more than 5 anyway, you know?
I think because the agendas were getting so large, there was a request to have more frequent meetings, Jeff,
Yeah.
and keep them
Yes.
to the 2 hours, which is why we got more meetings.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say if the meetings are gone up, shouldn't that figure be extended a little bit, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
You can, so there are so many within the year that you must have in order to meet the requirement of the audit committee. You can choose to have more than that if you so desire in order to cover other areas of business. So we wouldn't want to increase that, because you might decide, I doubt you will, but you might decide to go back to the, if you like, the statutory minimum. That wouldn't be a good step. But if you did and you'd up that number, then nobody'd be able to meet it. So we have to meet the same requirements as every other audit committee member, and that is on the statutory number that we have to meet, same as why it's quorate and so on. So that's the reason it has a number in there.
Thank you.
Can I ask you that?
Sorry, John.
Another question as well. Is there a probationary period for this person as well? If we ended up with somebody that, shall we say, didn't add value, going back to partnerships earlier on, could his contract be terminated, or her, shall we say, whoever?
Oh, so that Jeff is a good one. I'd have to defer to Tracy, I think, on that one. I'm not quite sure how you'd vote them out if they come in. Tracy, I don't know if you can help.
We don't. I've not known us do probationary periods for co-optees or lay members. We certainly don't do it for other committees.
We'll just make sure the recruitment's solid and.
Yes, definitely.
Who is in the room with me here? Shall I invite you to comment?
Hi. Oh, apologies. Hang on.
Who's going to come around?
It's quite okay a committee to appoint somebody. It's a council decision to appoint, and equally it's a council decision to remove that person from that body. So if they were failing in our needs as an independent person, council is the ultimate body to remove them.
Is that okay, Jeff?
Yes, and it actually mentions 2 full terms, I think. So we're actually talking about 8 years or 10 years, whatever it is now. So it's quite a long period.
No, that's all right. No. Let me just explain that again. Under the legislation, we could appoint for the first period of between 4 and 6 years. And then at the end of whatever period we've gone, between 4 and 6, at that stage, we can extend that for a maximum of a further 4 years. So the most someone could get is 10 years, but of course, if council choose to remove them sooner, they can do so. And of course, there's no reason for them to extend even after the 4 or 6 years they've initially given.
Okay.
I've got Simon Cocking's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just want to update committee on something that was discussed when this came to committee in December. As you're aware, there is a consultation process underway for the Local Government Election Wales Bill. Some of the changes to that bill, or proposed changes to that bill, include increasing the number of lay members on the committee to at least a third. So if this does come in, adding more lay members to the committee at this point does strengthen the committee in anticipation for those changes coming in.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, but the paper's asking us to consider the proposals to appoint an additional lay member to the Audit Committee and make a recommendation to the Council accordingly. Can I ask Jeremy to take a vote on that, please?
Okay, Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Yeah, for it, Chair.
Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Councillor David Halliwell. Councillor David Halliwell.
For.
Okay. Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
For.
Councillor Terry Hennigan. Councillor Oliver James.
For.
Councillor Peter Jones.
For.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Sam Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
For.
Councillor Mike White.
For.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. If we can move on to agenda item 7, which is the draft Audit Committee annual report. If I can just make a few comments, and then I'll hand over to Simon for him to add any highlight reports with regard to this paper, and then we'll ask for the committee's vote to see whether they accept that report or not. I just want to, on the outset, I want to acknowledge the Council and the efforts the Council are making to maintain sound governance through such torrid times with the governance with the COVID situation and the challenges that's brought all officers and staff members. I also want to pay tribute to the staff and officers of the Council and the partners for the commitments and what they've achieved in maintaining the services and support for those that need it during this period of time as well. And I want that to go on record, please. I think you've done a tremendous job in such awful times. The report reflects the work of the Audit Committee and the Committee's progress in delivering against its terms of reference, and we've picked up all the recommendations that Audit Wales have made in their assessment of our Committee's performance. Thanks to Simon Cockings, we've received regular reports from Simon, and can I thank you, Simon, also for responding to the additional information that we've requested during the year, which enables the Audit Committee members to give greater appreciation of the work that you've undertaken and also to understand the residual risks that you're raising around those moderate reports that you've issued to us.
Thank you, Chair.
As a result of that, we've also taken a step further in our maturity as a committee, and we've been inviting the heads of service to the committee for those moderate reports to give the committee assurance that they are taking action against all of those recommendations that are being made to strengthen the level of control that was identified that needed a strengthening and reducing the residual risk. Likewise, we've received reports from Audit Wales and officers, and the committee have raised a number of concerns in a range of areas. I've mentioned I'm meeting with the Chief Exec hopefully next week, which I've been trying to do for some time now, but because of the COVID situation, those meetings have had to be postponed time on time. I'm hoping next week we'll go ahead, and I'm aiming to pick up the issues around what we discussed earlier, the workforce pressures, risk management, the savings plans, the impact of COVID on the pressures as we move forward. We've also received the governance statement, and I'd like to extend my appreciation to Councillor Leslie Watson for her input into the governance work group and for her actions to the Audit Committee over the last couple of months. So I appreciate that, Leslie, and I know your work has been valued at that group. I wouldn't say any more because the paper speaks for itself. I just welcome Simon into the discussion to see if there's anything additional that he would like to say.
Thank you, Chair. There's not really much I can add to the Chair's description of the report. It's fairly standard to what it has been in previous years. It just outlines the in-depth work that the committee has done over the past 12 months. As the Chair said, there have been a number of positive developments throughout the year with the committee. I welcome the changes that the Chair's proposed and that we put in place, and I hope that is welcomed by committee and is appreciated, as I can tell it has been. As I say, we'll just continue to improve and develop as a committee going forward.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions before I finalise my comments, please? I can't see any hands up, so I can finish. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to all members of this committee and officers who have attended the committee for the support you've given me as Chair. I sometimes find it quite challenging to manage the large numbers, particularly with the virtual arrangement. But please let me know outside of the meeting if there's anything you'd like me to do differently or in another way, because I'm happy to make any changes that you want me to make. Obviously, looking forward to 2021 and the unprecedented challenges that the council are facing. It's important that as a committee we remain effective, and I know and I'm confident that the committee is committed to be effective in every aspect of its role. So thank you once again, everyone. If there are no other comments, we'll move on to... Okay. Jeremy's just reminded me this needs to go to council, so can we take a vote that you're happy for it to go to council? Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Councillor David Helliwell.
For.
Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
For.
Councillor Oliver James. Councillor Oliver James. Councillor Peter Jones.
For.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Sam Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
For.
Councillor Mike White. Councillor Mike White.
For, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay then. Agenda item 8, which is the internal audit plan 1920. Simon, we received the annual report at the last meeting, so can you, I'm just minded of the time and we've got a few more items to go through the agenda, not to shorten your comments, please say what you need to say, but if you can summarise to the best that you can, please.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the committee had the annual report previously, as that was linked to the annual governance statement. This is just the periodic monitoring report for Q4 1920. So this is the last quarter of the last financial year up to the end of March. It just summarises the work that was done as usual. As you can see in 2.2, in the quarter, 27 orders were finalised, which is listed in Appendix 1. Appendix 2 provides a summary of the scope of those reviews that were finalised in the quarter. Of those 27 reviews, 11 were rated as high assurance, 14 were substantial, and 2 were moderate. In that quarter, 165 recommendations were made, and 163 were accepted, which is a 99% acceptance rate. If I just skim through the rest, the additional work on grants that were done by the team in 2.6, and then 2.8, as per the annual report, summarises the completion rate in the year. Probably the two key areas that committee would like to focus on are in relation to the 2 moderate audit reports that were issued in the quarter. One of those was concessionary fares, and we have a representative in attendance to give committee an update on what's been done since that report's been issued. And the second was Cwmglas Primary School. And unfortunately, we couldn't get an attendee to come to committee today. They're due to attend in the July meeting to give an update on what's been put in place since that report was issued. Section 3 details the follow-up work that was completed in the quarter, and as we've discussed earlier, there were 6 follow-ups for moderate reports in that quarter, which obviously is a very high number. In all cases except for 2, the findings were positive, with all the recommendations being completed. 2 to highlight really that were a bit of a cause for concern were in relation to DBS, where we found that not all of the recommendations have been implemented, as in 3.3C, and also Pennerbryn Special School. Again, not all of the recommendations have been completed there either. So for both of those 2, we're having to revisit and retest those areas imminently to do a second follow-up. 3.4 also gives a brief summary of the city deal. Members had asked me to keep a track of the outcome of the internal review that was undertaken for city deal. At the time of writing this report, the follow-up review of that internal review had been completed by Pembrokeshire County Council, and the report on that was due to go to the Programme Board and Joint Committee. I believe it has gone. I believe it went to those committees before lockdown. But as you say, since that time, everything's really been on stop as far as I'm aware. I'll update committee further on that in due course. I'll speak to Martin on that one and come back to committee again. But then the appendices, as you can see, Q1 are just the orders that were finalised. Appendix 2 gives you some more detail on the scope of those reviews and some of the key issues that arose from the reviews. Appendix 3 gives details of 2 recommendations that weren't accepted, both relate to St Thomas Community Primary School. And then Appendix 4 is just the 1920 plan as of the 31st of March. So that's it, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions if members have any questions.
Okay, are there any? Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's on page 87, it is monitoring report, and it's education planning. It says 10 recommendations made, 8 agreed, 2 are not agreed. Is there any significant outcome on the recommendations, and if so, what are they?
Yes, Cyril, those 2 recommendations that you're asking about are the ones that are detailed in Appendix 3 of the report. So anything that isn't accepted, anything that isn't accepted, I report to committee and give some detail of what that entailed. Just to give you some information, that was for St Thomas Primary, and the overall assurance rating was substantial. The ratings on those 2 recommendations, as you can see on page 93, were both low risk recommendations, but I have provided the detail to committee to see exactly why those weren't accepted and the rationale from the head teacher as well.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff Jones.
Jeff Jones, Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, Simon, you actually said there's a representative from, is it the council's transport department? Or
that's right, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted a bit of an explanation there. Some of the figures sound quite daunting, really. It seems as though there's an error rate of 95% on the sample that you actually made. Which is probably only a tiny sample of what actually went through. Perhaps an elaboration on some of those figures would be, I'd be grateful.
Jeff, if I could we maybe discuss that at the next agenda item, because there's a full report on concessionary fares that's coming up at the next item.
Yeah, so I think that's helpful, Simon. The following report, Councillor Jeff Jones, is on that very item. And the transport representation will be involved in that discussion.
Right.
So we can hold that query and we'll pick it up at the next one. Councillor Peter Black, I've got a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to clarify Appendix 2, summary of scope of audits finalised. What does that mean? Does that mean the audits are underway and we'll have a report in due course, or does that mean that we've had the report? I'm just concerned about one particular aspect of that schedule.
Yeah, no problem. If you remember, the amount of detail that was being reported to committee was a lot less than it is at the moment. So the summary that you've got in Appendix 2 It's basically the scope of the audits that were issued as final in the quarter. So the scope is the area of testing that was covered in the finalised reports. And the assurance levels are the ones that were actually finalised in the quarter, issued as final.
Right, because the one I'm querying on is the highways and transportation on civil parking enforcement, which has got substantial assurance, but there's in the schedule, it says there's long-standing PCN fines outstanding with evidence of lack of review progress, earliest dating from 2014. So I'm wondering, do we need further information on that particular issue?
I'm sorry, what page are we looking at? Sorry.
Page 90.
Page 90.
Second one on the schedule on page 90.
And I'm happy to bring further detail to committee on some of these reports. We have in the past where, you know, committee members have queried some of the points in the summary. I'm happy to bring further information or distribute it to the committee members after the meeting.
That would be helpful, Chair.
Councillor Mike White.
Yes. I'd like to ask Simon, out of the funds with school, there's quite a few still outstanding there. Can we just obviously, is there things there that we sorted out? We've got service level agreements. Also, they are obviously working closely with the primary support officer with the budget.
Sorry, Mike, I didn't manage to catch much of that. Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, there's sort of 8 areas there. Can we find out from the school if they've got service level agreements in place to help them with the issue? Also, in regards to the issues with the budget, are they working closely with the primary support officer there for assistance?
Are we talking about a particular page here, Mike? I can't make out what the query is.
It's just those were areas that are still outstanding.
Councillor White, can I ask what page you're on? Councillor White, can I ask what page you're referring to, please?
Now. You have to bear with me.
Councillor White, can I ask if we can take that query outside of the meeting direct to Simon?
Yes, okay then.
Yeah, that's fine, Mike. That's fine. Thanks.
Okay. Apologies for that, Councillor White. Are there any other queries on Simon's paper? We're asked to note this paper, I believe. I do have some queries, but I'm happy to take those outside. It's just additional information on the report of what's been finalised, picking up some of Councillor Black's queries. So rather than delay the meeting any further, then I'll pick them up outside.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Agenda item 9. I think we've got Kath Swain and Barry Gilbert joining this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Kath here. I've got, as the manager of the ITU, I've got overall responsibility for the concessionary fares payments that the council makes. My colleague Barry Gilbert as part of the meeting too, because Barry was the officer who went to the bus companies with the auditor. So if there are any specific queries, then hopefully Barry and I between us will be able to answer them. So in terms of the report itself, we had an audit. There was an audit of the concessionary fares payments that we make to bus companies, which was carried out in the summer of 2019 on the 2018-2019 financial year. And the outcome of the audit report was a moderate rating, hence the reason that we're here today. So subsequent to that report, there was an action plan developed, and so this is an update today on the actions that we've taken, about the things that were highlighted within that action plan. So just to sort of set the scene in terms of the roles the parties play within the concessionary travel scheme, it's an all Wales scheme, which is in essence a Welsh Government scheme. And bus companies carry concessionary bus pass holders free of charge. But the bus companies are reimbursed in respect of those people that travel. And the reimbursements are made by the local authority based on claims that are made by the bus companies. But the majority of the funding comes from the Welsh Government, and the local authority pays a smaller proportion. I mean, overall, the cost of the concessionary fare scheme within Swansea is in the region of between £7.5 and £8 million. So as good practice, we in Swansea Council undertake an annual audit of the claims by all the bus companies. And First Cymru are the biggest operator in the Swansea area, and therefore the vast majority of the payments go towards them. So if we look at the recommendations in the action plan that were either high risk and medium risk, and I can tell you what action we've taken against them. So the first one was that we should liaise with the First Cymru to establish the reasons for the variances found. And there was a meeting with First Cymru and their auditors, EP Morris, on the 3rd of March. And as a result of that meeting, there were a number of shortcomings that were identified. The payments to the operators are done on information that they gather from their electronic ticket machines, which record all the transactions for passengers boarding the bus. So looking at that, we found that there were a number of errors in the ways in which they'd recorded passengers travelling within the Swansea area. So the first thing was that journeys that were starting at University Bay campus are obviously in Neath Talbot, but they had been coded to Swansea Council area. So that was an error in the sort of like the fare stage that they were recorded against. There were instances as well, and a lot of this had happened because the officer within First Cymru, who was dealing with the concessionary claims, was not local to the area, so they weren't very familiar with the South Wales area and the geography of Swansea. So when they were allocating the various transactions to the various councils, there was some confusion. So the company then were asked to provide the council with a list of all the fare stages and which local authorities area each one was allocated in. And any changes that they were going to make manually to the electronic data that they were providing from the ticket system would be provided to the council every month. If the company had overclaimed from us as a result of these mistakes, they'd overclaimed by 24.2 thousand in 2018-19.
Kath, can I stop you there? The report is quite comprehensive, and we're understanding what has happened.
Sorry, right, okay.
We're understanding what has happened, so I'm not necessarily needing for you to go through the report to tell us what's happened. Yeah. We've read it. Okay. Clearly, there's been a breakdown in internal control, which is why these errors were allowed to go through the system and the authority paid. What we need to know as the Audit Committee is what's been done to reintroduce the level of control so this will not happen again. So to conclude in that way, please, what are you doing to reintroduce the level of control to stop these overpayments being claimed?
Right. So what we've agreed is that I think it's difficult because the council is administering the payments on behalf of the Welsh Government, based on the information that's coming from the company, and it's with the company within themselves that hadn't had the tight enough control over what was going on within their own organisation. So what they've done now is they've appointed an external auditor, which is EP Morris, who will be auditing all of their claims and their calculations before they are submitted to the council. So hopefully that won't, these level of mistakes won't happen again. I mean, we do an audit every year on the claims from all the operators involved, and I'm aware that some other local authorities don't do that, but we've always done it as best practice.
Okay, I've got some hands up. Councillor Jeff Jones, if I can come to you, because you can't find your button.
Yes. Sorry. Hello, Kath.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so really, there's not a double claim here. It's just that they have been claiming against us where they should have claimed against Neath Talbot. So there's no essence of fraud as such.
No.
And we wouldn't have lost any money because of this, because we claim on this money back.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
The Welsh Government reimburse us for whatever we pay out.
Yeah. So there's no chance that they could claim for us and then claim from Neath Talbot as well. Is there a liaison between you and Neath Talbot with regards to the claims, or?
There is some liaison between us. I don't know if Barry can say exactly how detailed that is. Barry,
yes, if I can just come in, Kath. Yes, each month, if there's any concern my colleague in Neath Talbot raises over individual services, or if I've got any concerns, then we liaise quite stringently with each other and then go back to the bus company then for an explanation on that. The same would apply then with Carmarthenshire as well.
Because you can't defraud the system with regards to people put the card in the bus, I assume, and it just registers, so there's no chance to defraud there. So the only chance there could be a chance to defraud is that if they actually claimed in Neath Talbot and in Swansea with the same item.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
If I could chip in there, from what I read of this report, there was someone remotely that wasn't familiar with the geographical areas that were rightly classifying the authority to which the charge has been levied.
That's correct, yeah.
My concern is that the internal financial controls within this council did not spot that. So, except there's an annual audit.
Attention. The fire alarm system is about to be tested. There is no cause.
I don't know what happened next. So from my point of view is I'm still asking for that answer. What have we done to reintroduce the controls?
Right.
Please. This is
Do we go out for the fire alarms?
Okay. Yeah. What we've asked for is a submission when they submit their claims is details of the transactions, the fair transactions from the company as they're going along with their claims.
Got the evidence to support the claim that they make in.
That's right. Yes.
That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I just add that each month the company has to provide us with a list of the individual service numbers from which they're claiming concessionary fare reimbursement. So what I will do is look down the list to make sure all the services operate either wholly within the city and county of Swansea, or if they're cross-boundary into Carmarthenshire and Neath Talbot, and then I will pick out then any rogue service numbers and pick that up then with the company.
Okay, thank you. I've got 3 hands up. If I can ask for those who I'm going to call to try and summarise, because we're running short of time. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My concern was, as yours, that the company was using an officer to evaluate these claims who didn't live in the area and wasn't familiar with the area. So the question really is, has that now been addressed by the company? Is the officer doing that work now based in Swansea and understands the area in Swansea, or are we still going to have to keep double checking his work? Either the company's going to have to double check his work, or is the council going to have to double check his work? I think it's a huge amount of work to do this on a month by month basis. So really we have to be able to trust the system. Otherwise our officers are going to get completely subsumed by the amount of work involved.
I'm not sure where the person is actually based. I don't know if Barry knows that, but we've certainly been through with them, you know, the way in which the system needs to operate, and have asked for details of the transactions to come through every month so that we can cross-check that. We spent quite a lot of time talking to the managers local to Swansea to make sure that their ticket machines now are set up to record which transactions are in which authority. On, you know, each service has got a section in different local authorities where that boundary actually lies, and which is why the company have actually now appointed as well. They were appreciative of the fact that we had highlighted some of the flaws within the system, because they've now actually gone and appointed EP Morris as auditors for this process within their own organisation.
Okay, I've got two more hands up again. If I can ask if you can be quick and sharp and short with your questions. Councillor Cyril Anderson and then Councillor Mike White.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Kath, on page 101, 1.5,
yeah,
it says to claim from each local authority on the basis of where a concessionary pass holder's journey starts. There's
correct.
no say of finish. Can I explain one way of trying to get around this? If I get on in the city centre with my concessionary pass, I put it through the machine, but it charges me to Morriston if I'm on a number 36. Have they still sorted that out?
For each concession, I think Barry can help me probably out here. But my understanding is that when you show your pass on and it records it on the bus, there is an average adult fare which is applied to every journey in the Swansea area. Is that right, Barry? Am I right in saying that?
Yes, that's correct. It's broken down by individual depot. So, Councillor Anderson, if you went on a bus from Swansea to Neath, when you get on the bus in Swansea, Swansea Council would reimburse First Cymru for the journey. When you came back from Neath, Neath Port Talbot would reimburse First Cymru for the journey. And that would apply to any pass holder wherever they decide to board a bus in Wales.
Picking up something terrible.
Sorry, we've still got the alarm going at the moment, so I'm not quite sure what's happening.
This part of the building is being...
Oh dear.
Councillor Mike White, can you come in, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's the points I want to raise, obviously been raised by colleagues, but really what I was hoping for, Kath, that seeing that we've had past issues with ticketing machines that first we're using, to the point that Councillor Anderson was raising, to get on the journey halfway along the route, that you would be charged in terminus to terminus. What I'm going to find out is that people find out that with systems that first got in place, that they're actually transparent and they fit for purpose.
What? Sorry, you're breaking up there. I couldn't catch all of that question. I'm sorry.
Right, as I say, what my concern really was that because of previous problems which Councillor Anderson clearly raised of ticketing, people on it partly through the investigation have been charged terminus to terminus. What I would really wanted to find out really is that the systems that first now using are obviously transparent and fit for purpose.
Yes, well, that's what we've tried to do now in addressing some of the things that were highlighted in the audit report, and we're getting these transaction listings from them every month. and Barry goes through them all in quite a lot of detail to make sure that they are all within the Swansea area and they are being claimed from the right people. And the company First Group are obviously auditing their own case as well.
Okay. My apologies. My apologies for that.
Apologies, Chair, but can I come back on this?
Yeah.
I didn't actually hear what Kath or Barry said. What I'm trying to say is, if I get in town on a bus and Swansea City, go on a number 36 going to Morriston, but I'm only going halfway along. I'm only going to Mansfield, but they still charge the full fare from Swansea to Morriston.
No,
why are they still doing it?
Right. What they do is there is a standard, there's an average adult single fare for all journeys which are made within the Swansea area that's been agreed with the Welsh Government. And it doesn't matter then how far you travel, that is the amount that the bus company gets reimbursed. So you could be going 2 stops or you could be going 20 stops, but they get the same amount.
Okay, I need to bring this item to a close. Paxton, have you still got a hand up?
If I may, Chairman, I just for my own understanding, because I'm not sure about this, did you not say, Kath, that whatever we collect from the bus company or whatever, we pay to the Welsh Government and there's no charge to us either way?
No, the Welsh Government makes a payment to the local authority.
Right.
For the vast majority of the funding that we pay to the bus companies for carrying people for free.
So how are we supposed to know exactly whether the bus company information is what is given us is correct? Because we just don't know, do we?
Well, they download it from their ticket machines, and this is the purpose of them giving us the details every month now, and us going through them, and they're having the audit every year.
Yeah, but basically you're in a position where you can't really, which is not fair to you in essence, because you're getting information from people that you've got no way of checking independently in that sense.
Not unless we go through every single transaction that they carry out on the bus, no.
Could I come in there, please, Kath?
Yeah, sorry, Barry. Yeah.
That's okay. With the concessionary bus passes, they're actually smart cards and they are read electronically on the ticket machines. So that means that the number of occasions that a driver could manually record a pass and potentially double record the pass or fraudulently record a pass decreases considerably. And at the end of each month, each company has to detail the percentage of manual recordings and the percentage of electronic recordings with the smart cards. And we in turn then have to give that information to the Welsh Government. And the level for which there are concerns is if the number of manual recordings is more than 2%. So we're always looking for at least 98% of the passes being recorded electronically.
Okay.
Okay, can I draw this paper to a close? Obviously, you know, I appreciate what checks you've been doing, but obviously there was a breakdown in the internal control, and I'm pleased to hear that you're reinstating that. And if we can revisit this at some point, Simon, to check that those controls are working and effective.
Yes, thanks, Chair. We have been in discussion with Barry and Kath, I think this week actually. So one of my members of staff is due to do a follow-up and be in touch with them in due course. And again, that'll just be reported back to committee in the quarterly report.
Okay, I'm conscious it's 4 o'clock. Is everyone okay if I continue just to take agenda item 10 and 11 at this meeting? I should imagine it would only be about 10-15 minutes. Yep. Is everyone content for me to continue? Yeah.
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah. Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
Sorry, I just said yes, is all.
Okay. Okay, agenda item 10, and I think this is Adrian Chard.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Chair. I'm Adrian Chard. I'm the Strategic HR and OD Manager for the Council. And as you will be aware, I've submitted a report following on from the presentation that was made to the Audit Committee back in March with regard to the employment of agency workers. I'm just conscious of time. I'm not sure how much time I've got, but I can talk you through the detail of that report, which is basically an action for me to come back to the Audit Committee to report on the numbers and the cost of agency workers and compliance against the audit report, and to advise on the actions that have been taken as a result. In the detail of the report, you will see that in total across social services, but also primarily place, we have a total of 161 agency workers as at March. Primarily, these sit within the waste management and cleansing team in place, but also a number of agency workers in other areas in the Place and Social Services Directorate. The total cost for 2019-20 was just over £4.5 million, again primarily in Place and Social Services, and as you would expect, primarily in waste management and cleansing. Don't know if you want me to go into any more detail around that. I know there's detail in the report around that. We've also undertaken exercises to, if you like, advise and re-advise managers of our policy and processes with regard to the management of agency workers, and undertaken a review of adherence to those processes with the respective managers, and the responses to that are detailed in section 3.4 of the report, and you'll see that in the majority of cases there is full compliance with the requirements of the policy and respective processes. But in particular, though, in waste management and cleansing, there were, due to the large nature of the of agency workers that we have in that area, there are, if you like, arrangements in place to ensure compliance, but at the right level in ensuring compliance against this policy. In terms of next steps, and these were steps that were already identified, I think, particularly with regard to the review of our agency worker policy. We are currently reviewing all of our HR and OD policies, of which there are a large number, and the agency worker policy is one of those that are being reviewed to ensure that certainly that we comply with employment legislation, and but also in terms of best practice and in terms of the needs of the council. We've also identified that we need to do a review of our off-contract arrangements, which play a relatively small part of our contractual arrangements, and that is part of our plan to ensure compliance and consistency across the council with regard to the management of agency workers. I don't know if that gives you enough detail. If you want me to go into more detail, but again, I'm conscious of time and happy to field any questions.
Before I open up for questions, can I just ask what timescales you're working to for the review of those policies?
We're intending to review all our policies in the course of this current financial year. Agency workers is at the forefront of that, so hopefully we will get that in place certainly by the end of the calendar year, subject to discussions and agreement with our trade union colleagues and approval by the Joint Consultative Committee.
Can you keep us updated on how soon that will be completed and approved?
Yeah, sure. Yes, definitely.
The grip you need to put on agency is quite lacking at the moment from what I'm seeing. And I just want to ask a question before I open up around the standing approval in place for the area where you've got most agency work. Is that still going to be permitted, or are you getting a grip on that now?
I wouldn't say it's, there's not a firm grip on it, to be honest with you. I think what we need to do is to reinforce the arrangements, and we'll continue to do that. And we were doing that. We were doing that anyway. I think to some extent what we need to do is to reflect in the policy where the large number of agency workers in that area, and making sure that the governance and compliance is obviously fit for purpose to meet our regulatory requirements, but also to reflect the nature of the work in that area.
Just one final point on that. Do you know what the sickness levels are for that particular area?
I don't off the top of my head. I can find out that information for you.
I'd appreciate that, please.
Okay.
Right, I've got 3 hands up, and I'll go in the order that the hands are showing on the screen. And that's Councillor Peter Black, Councillor Leslie Walton, and Councillor Mike White, in that order, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask the issue about the timescale. My concern is that we're spending £4.5 million on agency staff. A number of those staff are being kept on for 12 months or more. And yes, it's going to be another 6 months before we have a proper review of that policy. It does seem to me that the need to review these policies are far more urgent than just letting. I understand it's got to go to trade unions. We've got to look at it properly. But it does seem to me that this is an area which does need to be addressed more quickly than that. And I would hope that the committee could stress that to the relevant cabinet member. I think also I'm just interested in when that review is carried out, who does that review report back to? Is that going to be a cabinet decision, or is that going to be done by officers? It does seem to me that it does need a lot more urgency in reviewing that, though.
Okay. Can I respond to the last question? In terms of the policy review, that's undertaken by HR alongside input from CMT and from our heads of service. That goes to CMT for approval, and for trade unions for consultation, and ultimately that goes to the JCC, which meets on I think it's a sort of bi-monthly basis, or has been meeting on a bi-monthly basis prior to COVID. So that's sort of the process and the timescales that we follow.
Can I just add, Chair? I mean, I understand we're using more agency staff at the moment because of COVID, and I understand that things are difficult, but it does seem to me that there needs to be a proper policy in place to deal with this at some stage.
I would agree with that, absolutely. Okay, Councillor Leslie Walton.
Yes, I just want to check, is the policy looking towards ensuring as few agency workers as possible? I mean, certainly the principle I go along with, I'd much rather as many of these staff were employed by us, being paid the proper paying conditions, holiday pay, etc., 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 than giving money to outside agency staff. And I am aware that this has been going on for quite a few years now. So I have to admit, I agree with Councillor Black that it is something that really needs a bit more urgent attention. But I appreciate that obviously the last few months have been incredibly difficult, and that's a different situation altogether.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, the responsibility for the day-to-day operation of this policy sits with the respective nominated officers. So that would be the heads of service in their respective areas. I mean, the purpose of this policy is to, if you like, put measures in place to ensure that there is compliance with the policy. And in that respect, it would be the responsibility of the respective head of service to ensure that they have the right employment mix, I guess, in their respective areas. And I think to some extent that's reflected in large parts of the council where there are no agency workers or very few agency workers.
Okay, Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate this service. It's clearly frontline service, and we've got to obviously personnel error to run the service on a daily basis. But surely, if the department, where there are vacancies there. Two people that have retired who finished us unfortunately. So how long are they taking to actually fill those posts? Surely it's something that the trade union should be working alongside the manager that's responsible for that department, so we can get people employed into those posts and keep including more agency staff, which is costing the authority more.
Councillor White, you're breaking up. I'm not sure that Mr. Chard will be able to respond to that.
Yeah, I'll try my best. I think are you saying in terms of the recruit when we have vacancies, what is the, if you like, the steps to be taken in filling that vacancy in relation to agency workers? If that's the question, I think to some extent again that's for local determination. And as I mentioned to, I think it was Councillor Walton, in the majority of cases, we do fill those vacancies with permanent or fixed term employees whenever we possibly can.
Yes, but surely the department will know when there's perhaps somebody that's retiring in that department, or somebody that had to finish perhaps through ill health, whatever. So we know that the vacancy then exists. Why is it taking us such a time to then actually advertise and fill that post?
Well, I suppose in answer to that question, again, that's for local determination. There will be a number of reasons why, or for the timescale for an appointment to be made. But I can't disagree with you. When we are aware that a vacancy needs to be filled, then the recruitment and selection process should be implemented as soon as practicable. Yes.
Okay, then can we draw this item to a close? Thank you again, Adrian, for coming and to attend to present. Clearly, I think this report is quite concerning. There's a considerable amount of money being spent on agency workers in one critical area that, yes, the service needs to be sustained. But if you can give some priority, as Councillor Black and other members of the Audit Committee have asked for, with the policy. And I'm also concerned with understanding the ratio of sickness with the volume of agency in that one particular area.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, just before we start that one, agenda item 12 and 13 are for information only. So this is the last one for discussion. So for your patience with me chairing the meeting today, but I think it's been quite valuable having a discussion around some of those key papers and key issues. So Jason Garcia, are you still with us?
I am still with you, Chair.
Apologies for keeping you so long, but if you can go through your paper for us, please.
Of course. You've got two documents. They're actually, if I can direct you in the wrong order, really. Can I turn you firstly to page 127? This was our original audit plan that was issued to the council back end of March, early April. The other document that you have, which I'll go through as well, is an update to that document as a result of COVID-19. So that's on what's on page 117. So I'll talk through the audit plan. I've got my colleague Colin Davis with us today as well. So he'll be talking through the performance audit element of this plan, but I'll do the remainder and we'll take questions afterwards if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Okay, so this is our standard sort of audit plan that you get each year. It's a little bit later than usual because of the current circumstances. So, the early section, no need to go through. I'm conscious of the time. There's a few paragraphs between 6 and 9 talking about COVID-19 and the impact of that. The first bit I'd like to refer you to is Exhibit 1, which was at that time what we identified as our risks for this year's particular audit. We identified one significant risk at that point, which is our standard risk of management overriding financial controls. And that's, as you know, would be in any one of our audits, that would always be present. And then we talked about other areas of audit attention, being the Oracle Cloud, introduction of that, although my understanding is that's now been put back as a result of COVID-19 and isn't so relevant. Keeping in view the progress on the city deal, the next one, and then you've got ones on the McLeod judgment and capital expenditure on the Swansea Central Phase 1, and then related parties and senior office remuneration. The letter that I sent through on page 117 slightly updates that document, and there's the same turn to it. There's the same table on page 121 going on to page 124, which is a slightly updated version of that, which brings in a significant risk on the impact of COVID-19, But to be fair, I will say this, we've already had your financial statements as a council. We received those on the 18th of May, which is a fantastic achievement for the council because your statutory deadline for this year was the 15th of June. And you actually delivered 3 days earlier than you provided us with your accounts last year. So that's, officers certainly need to be congratulated on that. And so a lot of the risks that are sort of referred to in that sort of general risks of COVID-19 didn't really materialize as far as the accounts delivery side of things, and not aware there's been an increased use of estimates. So going on into the plan then, as I say, my colleague Colin will talk about the performance section, but I'd like now to turn you to Exhibit 3 on page 137. This is just a summary of the grant work that we'll be doing this year. It's a lot less than in previous years. Welsh Government have generally stopped a lot of the schemes that we've historically audited on their behalf. And basically, these are sort of more Westminster-based returns and the returns that we've historically audited here. So we'll be continuing with these going forward. Then if I can take you to Exhibit 4, that summarises the fee for this year. Apologise, there's a zero missing in the actual fee for the audit of accounts last year. It wasn't £247, although I think you probably preferred if it was 247,000. And that's now come down to 237,000 this year. And then you've got the very little difference in the performance audit fee. The grant certification work, it has reduced. And again, all of our fees are estimates. We're only able to recover the costs of delivering the audit. And certainly the grant certification one is very much an estimate in view at the time we were doing this. We weren't 100% sure exactly what grants we would be undertaking at that point.
Jason.
Again, sorry.
Jason, some of the councillors are asking if you can move your mic a bit closer.
Sorry, okay. Is that better?
That's better, I think.
Okay, I'm just conscious sometimes I'm a bit loud. So,
yeah.
And then the fourth element is relating to the audit of Swansea Bay Port Health Authority. So there's showing a bit of a reduction overall from 404,000 down to 368,000. I'm pleased to note that there's very little change to the audit team for this year. The only new individual is Daniel King, who's my audit lead for financial audit. Everybody else has been in post previously with yourselves. And then going as far as the timetable is concerned, I think now I'd just like to talk about where we're at. As I say, we've had your accounts. The audit is progressing. One of the issues we've had to encounter in relation to COVID-19 across local government is how the council advertises the accounts and allows electors their rights to inspect the accounts, ask questions of the council, and then subsequently the auditor. Now, obviously with lockdown, this wasn't able to be arranged earlier because ultimately it wasn't safe to do so. So we've advised the council that we've set a date for the 1st of September as the date when members of the public can question us as auditors over the 1920 statement of accounts. Your accounts will be on what's called deposit, that is available for electors to inspect and ask questions for the 4 weeks prior to that. And there'll be a notice going in the local press by mid-July, giving 2 weeks notice of the start of that inspection period. Our aim is still, if the council can arrange relevant meetings, to sign off your financial statements by the statutory deadline of the 15th of September for this year. So we're certainly aiming for that, and Ben and his team are looking at when we can set up meetings to potentially do that. But that's all I had from the financial audit point of view. If I can now pass you over to Colin, who will talk about the performance audit, and then if members have got questions for either of us, I'm sure we can take those questions.
Thank you, Jason.
So I'm hoping now Colin is there somewhere.
Colin, are you there? Colin, Audit Wales? I don't think he is.
Okay.
Oh, hang on a sec.
Hello?
Oh,
Hello, Chair, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, welcome, Colin.
Thank you. In terms of the performance audit programme, the programme in the audit plan is set out on page 136 of your papers in Exhibit 2. As Jason has said, that programme was shared with you back end of March, and we have subsequently written to you saying that that programme would need to be updated and revised in light of COVID-19. If I can take you through the principal changes to the programme that have been decided, and I might add, not just for Swansea County Council, but for all 22 councils in Wales in terms of the performance audit programme. Exhibit 2 would now contain these new pieces of work. Firstly, financial sustainability review. That was intended, that was in the original programme, but intended to follow up on the work that we did last year. Frankly, COVID has meant that there needs to be a completely new focus on that. We'll commence work scheduled for later this year in July, following your first quarter outturn report, and we'll be looking to examine the impact of the pandemic on council budgets, but also on the council's financial prospects going forward. And as well as the review of Swansea Council position, we intend to produce an all-Wales view of the outlook for local government finance in Wales. And that all-Wales view, I would anticipate late autumn, late autumn. And I should say that in carrying out that work, we're having active discussions with both the WLGA and the Society of Welsh Treasurers. So financial sustainability remains the title, but the focus of the work has been substantially changed. In Exhibit 2, we highlight a review under well-being of future generations that will focus on the theme of prevention. That work has been cancelled, and it's being replaced by support and challenge and taking assurance from the arrangements that the council is making in terms of recovery planning in moving from the response to the pandemic with easing of lockdown measures and with an eye to reinstating services, but services that will be fundamentally changed by not least the need to introduce social distancing, etc. We'll be looking at the arrangements the council has in restarting services, taking due account of risks, but also to ensure that the council grasps opportunities for a different and sustainable future. And the third strand of work that's currently ongoing is not really an audit project, but a real-time capturing and sharing of novel practice that we have observed and councils share with us in terms of how they're responding to COVID-19. And a lot of that work is the results are being published in real time on our website and through Twitter accounts, etc. Those findings we are signposting to our key contacts in councils. Our key contact, just for clarity, is Richard Rowlands in Swansea. So the programme on Exhibit 2, page 136, is now replaced with those three areas of focus for this year.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Chair.
Jason Garcia, any additional comments before we take questions?
Sorry, Chair, you broke up a bit then. Quite hear you.
Are there any additional comments before we take questions?
Not from me, not at all. I'm happy to take whatever questions members want to ask.
Any hands up? No? Jeff Jones, Councillor Jeff Jones. Your mic is muted, Councillor Jeff Jones.
Trying to press two computers at once here. Page 135. The breakdown between capital and revenue expenditure, it's not classified correctly. They say we've expended up until 31st of March 18 million. What sort of figures are we actually talking about there? You know, how much has been posted to the wrong, either capital or revenue?
We're not saying there's any being posted, to the wrong amounts at all. Or what we're saying is there is a risk of it, with it being a significant new project. Mm-hmm. And the work we will undertake during the audit is in two areas on this. One, we'll look at transactions to ensure that they've been accounted for correctly as either revenue expenditure or capital expenditure. And then secondly, around the year-end position, that only transactions up to the 31st of March are included in the 1920 statement of accounts. We're not saying we found anything, we're just highlighting that as a significant project, there is a risk, so we will be undertaking work on that.
Okay, sorry, if I can ask one other, it's page 133, you've got quite a lot of figures there to do with the city deal. Yeah. It actually says that, I know the first release of 18 million went to the region, shall we say, but you've got expenditure there. Council is expecting to receive 7.4 million from the Joint Committee. I know the project's only been running, shall we say, 2 years, and I thought the release of monies was 1.5 million a year. So where's those 7.4 million come from?
Right. Well, the first thing to say on the other table from the second document, that's...
Oh, something gone wrong with the sound. Jason, I don't know if you can hear me. There's something gone wrong with this sound. Sorry, can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah. Jason? Jason? Yeah. It looks
Sorry, Chair, it's Colin. I can still hear you, but unfortunately I can't answer the councillor's question. It's Jason's field.
Okay, I think. Okay, I think we'll have to take that question and wait for a response. Yeah. Outside the meeting, I think Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah. Can Jason hear that question? Can he signal that he actually heard the question?
I don't think he can hear me.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Oh, yeah, good.
Jason, if you can hear me then, can you pass that the response to that question back to Councillor Jeff Jones in due course?
Yeah.
We clearly lost the sound for this.
I think he did hear it. I think he put his thumb up, actually.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, his thumb up again then.
He's also responded on the chat that he will do that.
Right.
Jason, can I ask, are you asking the Audit Committee to support the approval of this plan to be approved at full council? Put your thumb up if you are.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Can I ask then for a hand over to Jeremy for him to take the vote?
Okay, Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Approve.
Councillor Peter Black.
Approve.
Councillor David Halliwell.
Approve.
Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
Approve.
Councillor Oliver James. Councillor Peter Jones.
Approve.
Councillor Jeff Jones. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Your mic is muted again.
Approve. Sorry. All right, can you hear me?
Councillor Mike Lewis. Councillor Mike Lewis. Councillor Sam Pritchard.
I'm happy to approve.
Councillor Leslie Walton
Approve.
and Councillor Mike White.
Approve.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience today. Agenda item 12 and 13 are for information. There are some updates I want to make on the tracker, and also I review the meeting schedule as well, the agenda, and we can discuss that in more detail at the next meeting. Can I apologise for running over today, but I think it was some important reports on that we needed to give due the time to. But again, I apologise for running over, and thank you all for your time and input. Thank you. Meeting's closed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.